Back to Business, the show that highlights entrepreneurs from the Highland and White Lake areas. I'm Kaylee, and today we have Dick Russell, a friend from the Friends of Highland Recreational Area. Thank you for being here with us today.
Glad to be here, Kaylee.
First off, what is the mission of Friends Highland Recreational Area?
The mission of Friends of Highland Recreation Area, which is a 501c3 tax-exempt corporation, is to rebuild, repurpose, and reutilize the Haven Hill complex of buildings located within Highland State Recreation Area. These buildings initially were built by Edsel and Eleanor Ford in 1924 and consist of a gatehouse where everyone had to enter, a large sheep barn that has been, unfortunately, a part of it was destroyed by some sheer winds and some neglect over the years, a carriage house where there's also a chauffeur's quarters, and we only have the footprint, unfortunately, of the original lodge made out of large cedar logs that came from the Upper Peninsula. Unfortunately, that was due to arson in 1999, but the elements that remain is the mission of FOHRA, as we call ourselves, Friends of Highland Recreation. Here.
Okay, all right. So this area, just a few miles down the road, was once a vacation spot for Edsel Ford. Tell me about that.
Well, Edsel Ford was very busy in the automotive business that he was in. He wanted to find an area that he could relax and get away from the tensions of that business on a daily basis. And he decided to try to find the highest elevation areas in northwest Oakland County. And obviously he acquired acreage enough to have an estate that was 2,472 acres. And that became the beginning of his nerve retreat, his heaven away from the workplace. And it had a change, so it became Haven Hill. And for the first 2 years, they basically lived there as their home, raising a family of 4 children, while they constructed what we call the Ford House over in Grosse Pointe Shores. I kind of call that as the 60-room rock house because it's totally different in its structure and combination. So they then used Haven Hill for a entertainment, retreat, weekend, have guests there, and they had some very significant historical visitors in their time.
And Thomas Edison stayed there?
Definitely. Goodyear. We probably had Burroughs, who was the author of the Tarzan stories. Most surprising first guest was the Duke of Wales, who was over from England. He abdicated the throne, and it was a real opportunity for people in that society level to get together, but it was a real combination of people in a wide range of business, mostly focused around the automotive activity, but you can't overlook Edsel's interest and focus to the arts in his support of the Detroit Institute of Arts, particularly across the Depression era. He actually was an artist himself. He probably did a lot of photography. You don't see very many pictures of Edsel, mainly because he was behind the lens of the camera. But that was his nerve retreat, a chance to get out and take a walk. They had a large pool. They had a clay court, tennis court for playing tennis, a riding stable. So they were basically self-sufficient with a very large vegetable garden so that they could entertain a few number of guests or a large party. And that happened a lot.
Are there any stories from that era?
Well, some of the stories from that era are the fact that the estate had been used for entertainment for a while and started again in 1924, 25. And the Lindbergh kidnapping in May of 1932 that resulted in their son being killed had an awful lot of interest in the paparazzi, the news media. But the news media of the day was print. It was newspapers. There was no internet as we know it today. So Edsel made that facility, the Haven Hill complex, available to the Lindberghs, Charles Lindbergh and his wife, to try to give them a protection zone, including installing an 8-foot chain link fence around all 2,472 acres of the complex. Then having armed security guards and watchdogs, generally German shepherds, that would be there to make sure that the facility was secure from those that didn't need to be there. That's one of the main stories of Haven Hill.
Wow. So what did they do for fun?
Like I say, they would ride horses. They had a very large stable. They also had a kidney-shaped pool that was probably down to 12, 13 feet at its deepest point. They also had a clay tennis court with a special attendant to try to make sure that it stayed in pristine condition for when they went to play tennis. They had a south patio and a north patio area off the lodge, and would use those for entertaining activities. I'm sure that they probably were even into shooting clays with rifles and so on, but their real interest was to get out in the woods and enjoy the natural aspects of Highland State Recreation as we know it today.
Okay, so tell me about some of the plans you have for the future recreational center.
Well, one of the things that we are trying to do is to bring back a lot of the buildings that were used, in some cases, the gatehouse, the entry point for entering the Haven Hill complex, is where the security guard would be. You check in and drive through the main gate. That gatehouse we're trying to make into a welcome center. Unfortunately, around 1982, the state legislature couldn't allot enough money for operating the state, and the natural resource department basically had a lot of its funding removed, and so some of the nature center that was there at the time was discontinued, the naturalist was laid off, and there were several things across the state of Michigan that I'm thankful that we have a recreational passport program today off of our license plates to help the parks. But the park system really kind of closed up the buildings. The gatehouse was last used in 1991 when the last family had a chance to live in there. We are trying focus to make the gatehouse complex, which is a garage, portico, and the main gatehouse building, into a welcome center. And I brought a few pictures today to try to show basically some of those areas, and maybe we can look to that.
All right, that sounds great. So how does this promote economic growth in the economy?
Well, one of the things that we really are trying to do is promote tourism and visitors to come to the park. Some people in the area may know that we have a contract that's been released and contractor selected by the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Park and Rec Division to build a hike, bike, and equestrian trail that will go through Highland Recreation Area. It will go right through the portico at the gatehouse, past portions of the park and ending at Teeple Lake. So it's almost 2.8 miles long. And the area in bicycling and cycling within the region has really become very strong. Anyone that's used the Milford bike path will know that it's really used a lot. So we expect the increased visitor concentration on the park, and for that reason we'd like to make sure that the gatehouse is that welcoming center, and it needs a lot of work. It doesn't have functioning water. We have to have a revitalized septic system, revised electrical in the buildings, but the outdoor areas are the ones that we're going to start with first, and then work our way for the interior. And in some cases we've done that with our garage. We've been able to take the walls down, put in some electrical, actually install plaster that's representative of the era in that time frame. So we're trying to actually rebuild and refocus so that we can do a new program that we call our Artist in Residence program. We're going to start to do that, and Larry Filardo, who is a member of our organization, very qualified artist in many different areas, is working to be our first Artist in Residence, where he's going to be able to do painting and watercolor work right out in front in various areas of the park, leave sketches of nature, but mainly he's trying to concentrate on the people of Haven Hill, people that made that work. Edsel and Elinor Ford, Henry Clay, their youngest son, who owns the Lions football team. And also he's got Amy and Harry North in his plans. They were the caretakers that stayed at Haven Hill all the time, whether they were guests there or not. They were taking care of the property, and Harry actually operated also as the butler in case there was driving chores. So we're looking forward to show off not only the natural setting of Haven Hill and Highland State Recreation Area, but the people that were there and the stories that we can tell.
All right, so why do you think it's important to preserve this area?
Well, it's important that we understand the automotive heritage that's around Southeast Michigan. There are so many buildings and activities, things that have happened. Henry Ford's country village manufacturing activities, like the power plant in Milford, was an extension of the Ford plant here in Milford that made carburetors. A lot of people would lose the fact that there was a lot of automotive heritage in the area, and if you mention the fact that Edsel Ford owned Haven Hill, to some people that would come to the park, they had no knowledge that it was there, or if it was there, who the visitors were from that era and that time frame. So we think that the automotive heritage is really a reason for saving that knowledge and sharing it with automotive enthusiasts or tourists in general that would enjoy the park system here in Michigan.
Okay, so tell me about the rewards that you get from working in the recreational area.
Well, when I support the FOHRA, I'm generally the cook. I end up taking my Boy Scout skills and putting some things together for those that do other work, carpenters and plumbers, electricians, those that just rake the lawn, trim trees and clean shrubs and clear back areas that we're trying to open up. But I personally get recognition internally to say, yeah, we're moving forward. We're going back to that era to share things. And we really would like to try to show some of the real details that are in the gatehouse as we get forward to do that. One of those areas is right here.
Oh, wow.
The original stenciling that's below some of the paint and the activities that are there. So we really personally enjoy getting involved with it. And from a leadership role as president of the Friends of Highland Recreation Area, I also have to write grants with the assistance of others, to try to find funding for the expenses that we do. Quite often we find that when we take a wall apart, that the internal framing structure and the boards sometimes are not very good condition, so we have to replace with new. But we want to replace so it represents that era and that historical period of construction as well. And we have our challenges. There's a lot of areas that we're finding, the more we look at it, that we need some work, but it's really a labor of love.
All right, so what got you so interested in this?
Well, I really got interested in the Friends of Highland Recreation Area because, as another hat that I wear, I'm chairman of the Chief Planning Programs Committee of the Great Lakes Field Service Council here in Michigan, of the Michigan Crossroads Council. And we have a backpacking trail. It starts right in Highland Rec, just west of the Edsel Ford barn. And at one time, there were some discussion about the barn and how to work with it. And so I represented scouting in that council of discussion. And it was determined that it would be better to form a nonprofit organization and go forward, try to save the barn. And I kind of say that the helium balloon raised my hand to be the officer in charge and stepped in to become the chairman or president. And in that period of time, we actually incorporated as a Michigan nonprofit corporation in May of 2008 and filed the paperwork for the federal government so that the IRS granted us our 501c3 status in June of 2009. And we've been able to use that for those that want to give donations that they can write off on their taxes, but more for the benefit of trying to preserve the automotive heritage that really is the Haven Hill complex at Highland State Rec.
So how is a nonprofit different from any other business?
A nonprofit is similar to a real business in many ways, but it also is different. You still have to raise money. In our case, we have all volunteers. We have no employees, so we don't have to worry about W-2s and income tax, things of that sort. But we do have to worry about permits. That's no different than anyone in the business that would have to add on or make a renovation to their building. We still have to promote programs and try to find like-minded people that would like to come to work with us as a nonprofit, just like you would like to solicit as an employer to bring an employee in that wants to work in your business, whether that be graphic arts or construction or flowers or whatever. There's still aspects of keeping records, trying to file the required business entity documents with the state every year. So we have to do that. There's also a very important form called a 990 that is filed by nonprofit organizations every year for the IRS to make sure you understand who your board of directors are, how you made money, how you spent money, and what your mission is and how that relates to that. So it's really some of the same skills. You still could use computer skills, marketing skills, those that would be associated with trying to branch across the community to network with other similar programs so that you might combine the Highland Equestrian Conservancy, because they're into horses, to come out to the park and use the equestrian trail that's being refurbished and made brand new. So we're trying to collect and bring others into the organization, just like you would market and bring customers to your restaurant or to your flower shop or to your carpet store.
So I know there are some all qualities that you must have that you can't learn from a textbook. For example, dedication to your community. What other qualities do you think a person needs to be successful in a nonprofit business?
Well, in most cases, you have to learn to be creative on how to spend money, earn money, or do trade-offs for trade in kind. Maybe you can get an electrician that would come out and donate his time or his company to bring items that you might need in that process. So in some cases, you're into bartering, you're into trade-offs. I'll help you with your nonprofit if you can help me with ours. So it's quite important that you share across the network of nonprofits in the community to make the community a better place. In the Lakes area, Huron Valley community is great for the network that is there for nonprofits. So in some cases, you might support community sharing by hosting a walk in the park. And just like you would interface with a business network, you might be able to work across those that you're associated with, make sure things happen.
All right, so what is a typical day like for you in the park?
Busy, because you have to recognize that the Friends of Highland Recreation Area is only a small portion of my volunteer activities, but it is a big portion in certain weeks of the month. Certain months of the year are busier. We have an annual red bud reveal when the red bud flowers come out on those trees at the end of April. That'll be this year on Saturday, April 26th, and the rain date will be the next day on Sunday. So we have a lot of things that we're trying to do to the gatehouse. We're trying to get a new roof on. We're trying to get some roof systems in place so that the exterior of the building is more complete, a few more windows installed, and that will be a busy time. And then we have in August a Haven Hill Festival that we do every year the last Saturday in August. So that there are certain months that we're quite busy when we'd like to encourage people to come and visit. And so those months in between, we tend to do landscape work or construction work, painting, scraping, things that we would need to do. So my day is filled quite a bit. I tend to have other organizations that pull at my time slots so that I have a very busy day, but I allot it to many organizations across the day. So being time efficient is important, and hopefully keeping records of where you're supposed to be at the right time is critical.
What's your favorite part of your job?
I think seeing the aspects of people coming out to visit the park in this case, to see the changes, seeing the wildlife. It's amazing, even with the heavy snow that we're having right now, that the deer that are coming out because they can't find feed or are collecting in certain areas that we don't normally see them. The other day I had seen 5 wild turkeys up at the very front end of the park. So you'll tend to see a lot of activity throughout the season, and of course the flowers and the natural activity that's in Highland State Recreation is really great. I believe in 1972 they received a National Natural Landmark status, one of 27 locations across the country, to recognize the unique combinations of flora and fauna in the park. And that great recognition is there, but people have to come out, walk the trails, spend the day in the park to see that. And we encourage people to do that, particularly as we move forward with a new bike path and some opportunity to maybe get some of these buildings up and going so that they might be used in support of a great natural surrounding area in Highland State Rec.
Okay, so it's a good feeling for you.
It is.
All right, so what are some of the perks of your job?
I think some of the perks of the job are seeing the development of scouts that use the area. We have one Girl Scout. She's working on her Gold Award, and she's actually involved with a automotive historical sign placement. We have 8 of those in the park now, but it's on Genevieve Gillette. Genevieve Gillette was a graduate, first female graduate of Michigan Agricultural College, now known as Michigan State. And she went to work for Jen Jensen, a noted landscape architect, the dean of architecture for that period of time. She worked for him for 4 years in Chicago. And Jen's basically grew up in Norway and was unique in trying to have a natural surrounding in his park systems that he would plan. And he encouraged Genevieve Gillette to come back to Michigan and start lobbying for the Michigan State Park System. And it's really a blessing that she did. She was a relentless letter writer. She contacted lobbyists. In fact, she held meetings of the Ann Arbor Botanical Society at Haven Hill to have initial discussions about great places in Michigan that we need to preserve for our residents and those that visit. Sleeping Bear Dunes, Pictured Rocks are some of the early ones that were there. And this is a feature of this Girl Scouts Gold Award, and we expect to have that sign mountable this spring to tell the story of Genevieve Gillette and how the park system in Michigan really had a nucleus of interest right here in White Lake, Michigan at Highland State Recreation Area. So those are some of the perks. When you see a young lady do the research, come across and develop a sign that fits within our current plan, and there's an opportunity to see others develop as well. Skills in the area of finance, skills in the area of media promotion. So there's a lot of development that goes on, and the interface in other groups is real important for what we see developing out there in the wild of nature in Highland State Rec.
So from everything, what's the most rewarding?
I think the most rewarding is various activities in the disappointments that come. On June 8th, 2008, 165 feet of the Edsel Ford barn collapsed from a sheer wind of about 74 miles an hour. And that created such a large pile of debris that we weren't sure exactly how to handle that problem. We had to secure it off. We went out and networked and found fencing to surround that area to keep it secure, for keeping people from going into that area and being injured or lost. But one of the most great rewarding opportunities in that disgusting low end of the process that happened was when the chainsaws were able to cut through the west wall, and we actually had a walkway to go from one side of that barn to the other instead of walking all the way around the end of it, because that barn is 225 feet long. It saved us an eighth of a mile walk just by walking across. The cheers went up, the chainsaws quieted, but we were able to make a positive shining star out of that disappointing pile of rubble that we had to work with for 10 months to get rid of. So sometimes you get those rewards along the way that are even in the disappointing areas that you might find in the process.
What's the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge is moving forward to complete our lease agreement with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, Parks and Rec Division, as we've been at this for 5 years and we don't have a building yet that has complete electric, complete water, complete septic system, and that can really be utilized by the outside public community. So we've got a lot of challenges in front of us, and most recently we're greatly successful in getting rid of asbestos-containing materials in the gatehouse. It was the last of the 3 buildings. We occurred and made that happen last October through a matching grant process with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, Parks and Recs Division, and it was about a $12,000 expense, and it really was important because we couldn't even go in the building and work without that material being moved. So we're moving forward, but most importantly, we're moving forward to share that spending a day in the park is really the place to be.
Of course. Are there opportunities to become part of the Friends of Highland Recreational Area?
Yes, we have a membership level even for students, and it's not very expensive. Our membership levels basically are for a single, for family, or a patron of those that would really care to contribute to the expense support of what we're trying to do. So we'd be glad to allow anyone to go out to our webpage, which is www.fohra.org, or give us a call, and we'll be able to answer any questions in the community. We generally are in the park on the 2nd and 4th Sundays of the month trying to work a particular building, a particular project, and through the winter months it's a little bit more difficult, but we do have a lot of projects in front of us this spring and hopefully out through next fall that would give you a chance to stop by and inquire about what we're doing and see what our aspects that we've been able to accomplish in 5 years so far.
All right, so finally, for people who are interested in running a nonprofit business, what advice would you give them?
I would advise people to consider taking nonprofit management courses. After 40 years of working with General Motors, I basically retired in 2005 and had an opportunity in that process of working through a management service that directed me over to Lawrence Tech University. The management department at Lawrence Tech University has a nonprofit degree that can both be an undergraduate level or a master's. And I actually went and got a certificate in nonprofit management from Lawrence Tech, in essence a third of an MBA, because I was supported by the General Motors educational process as part of the package that I got to retire. And that opened up my eyes to a lot of other aspects of the nonprofit business. What's important, what's legal, how do you operate, what are traditional nonprofits doing? And along with that, I had one class that was shared with the University of Indiana Center of Philanthropy. So I ended up having credit in both universities and as a result went off and got a certificate in fundraising management from the University of Indiana Center of Philanthropy in that process over about 2 years. You can now do that class totally online, and it was on campus for a while for some of the courses I had. But if you're really interested in a nonprofit career, helping those in need around the community or around the world, I would direct you to a nonprofit program. But Lawrence Tech's management department has a great program that I personally went through and really continue to support as an alumni of that program.
All right. Well, Mr. Russell, thank you so much for being here with us today. And for those of you at home for watching, Back to Business is brought to you by the Highland White Lake Business Association, which is produced by the Lakeland High School video class. Now go back to business.